Good afternoon everyone, and welcome back to the Rah Rah Rabbit. Now this is a topic that I've kind of wanted to talk about for a while, but I haven't really known the best way to approach it, and it's understandably a very tricky subject to navigate, and that is people who fake or who may be faking a mental illness, particularly dissociative identity disorder. Now, I don't tend to spend a lot of time in online communities, mostly for my own sanity, but when I look on Twitter, this is something that is often discussed. And it can be quite an uncomfortable thing because no one wants to really accuse another person of faking something like this, especially when it's highly likely that we've had our own experiences invalidated and dismissed, and we probably haven't been believed when we've tried to talk about it. So knowing what it's like to have people question what you're going through, it's then just uncomfortable challenging another person's experiences. So I'm going to talk about when I was in school, because that was when I first started having the experiences that I have. I was about 11 or 12 when I first started to hear a voice, and this voice was Darren, and at this point I didn't really know what was going on. I was just aware that I could hear this person and they were very derogatory towards me, very insulting, threatening, just generally quite horrible. And I didn't tell anybody about it because I didn't really know how to tell someone about it, and because Darren was also very adamant that he didn't want anyone to know about it, to know about him. And I don't recall a great deal from this time because I know that I was just incredibly spaced out and pretty much on autopilot, and I just kind of got on with it. Now, I thought perhaps maybe it was schizophrenia because that was the only disorder I was aware of at that time where you heard voices. And with Darren, it was a thing where I could hear him audibly outside of myself, but other times it felt more like it was internal. I could still hear it, but it felt like he was inside of me. I don't know, the experience varied. And I was worried about people finding out about it, and I was worried about being believed as well. Now, when I finally did mention this when I finally mentioned it to my mum, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I think I was in the car coming home from school, and I think I just kind of blurted out that I thought I might be schizophrenic. And the response I got was not what I expected. Straight away, she was like incredibly angry with me. She just kind of blew up. I didn't understand why, and that was that. And then I remember when later on in the evening when we were at home, she started saying that I spent too much time on my computer. I spent too much time talking to people online. The games that I was playing were influencing me. Stuff like that. Stuff that is pretty sort of classic denial, but I didn't register it as denial at that point. And it also just didn't make sense to me because the games that I played predominantly at that point was The Sims. And, although, I mostly, set fire to all of my Sims and killed them, but, that's what everyone did. But, she kind of thought whatever I was engaging with was having a negative effect on me, or had somehow convinced me that I was having these experiences when I really wasn't. So instantly, I wasn't believed. And I thought other people were going to have this same response or have a similar response. And I just didn't quite get why people could be so dismissive, like straight away, or even angry. That didn't make sense to me. Again, it's my mum, it's denial. That's kind of her way of dealing with things. But obviously, in that moment, it just kind of... If anything, it reinforced Darren quite a lot because he always said that people wouldn't believe us or that they would be against us. So, it didn't really help. Particularly during high school years, I found as well that whenever somebody found out about something new, that they often copied it. So, for example, I think it was maybe I was in year 7, and Big Brother was on TV, and on that series of Big Brother there was a guy called Pete, I think his name was, and he had Tourette's, and for a lot of people this was their first introduction to Tourette's, and one of Pete's main tics was to yell out wanker. So a lot of kids started doing that and saying that they had Tourette's, and which they clearly didn't, because they were obviously copying exactly what Pete was doing. They thought that Tourette's was just yelling out swear words. They didn't understand like the full range of symptoms and experiences that happen with Tourette's. And so for ages there were kids kind of doing this, I guess because, who wouldn't want to yell out swear words and be let off for it because, they can't help it. And I'd found this with other things when people kind of found out about new, different disorders, that people tended to copy that. And I don't know if it was because it was edgy or cool, or because it gave them an excuse to act out certain behaviours and not be held responsible for it. Like I said, with the Tourette's thing, a lot of kids would say they couldn't help it because they had Tourette's. It was a way of getting away with certain things. And I recall, maybe I was about 14, 15, there was a character introduced onto Hollyoaks, which is a soap here in UK, which is sort of primarily targeted towards teenagers and young adults. And this character was called Newt. And now Newt had this friend called Eli, and instantly I knew that Eli wasn't real. Before it was even revealed that he was like a hallucination, I knew that he wasn't real because he never interacted with any other characters apart from Newt. And just the way that things progressed, I kind of recognised a lot of that in my own experiences. And when it came out that Newt was schizophrenic, that Eli was, I guess, a hallucination, I actually started to panic a bit. On the one hand, I thought it was great that they were showing characters like this. They were bringing awareness to such a big subject, and I don't think I'd ever seen that in a soap before. But I was really scared that there'd be kids who watch Hollyoaks who would see that and then start mimicking that. And why I was scared of that was because I still felt I had to hide my own experiences, and I thought, well, if I say I've seen this on Hollyoaks, people might think that, again, I'm making it up, or I've seen it on Hollyoaks, so I've convinced myself that I have this thing, similar to what my mum was accusing me of doing with, spending too much time online or playing The Sims and setting fire to my Sims. So, I was always worried whenever awareness was brought to a subject that instead of doing what it was supposed to do, which was, helping people who were having those experiences, it would instead make people believe me less. There were also a few kids at school who they didn't say they had DID or say they had schizophrenia, but they would kind of have alter egos, and this was at a time when Bebo was a thing, which was kind of before MySpace, and mostly it was kind of like high school kids who had Bebo. And I knew a few people who had created Bebo accounts for their alter egos or voices that they claimed to hear. And again, this was something that made me really kind of panic, because for one thing, I don't know if these people were, faking it or making it up. They could have been having these experiences, but maybe that was my own prejudice there, thinking that they were just, lying about it. Because I had that experience of people thinking that I was just making something up or exaggerating. So I kind of would think the same of other people. But it also made me feel like, again, I would be believed less because all these other people seem to be doing it. And I don't know, being a teenager was a very difficult thing for me, as I'm sure it is for most people, in that it just felt like no one really believes anything that you say, or all of your experiences can be attributed to you just going through puberty or, just being a teenager. And when I saw people being open like this, again, I honestly can't say if they were faking it or not, because I don't know, I'm not them, I don't know everything about that. But whenever I saw people talking very openly about things, I would automatically assume that they were just full of shit. And that was because I felt like the only way you could be mentally ill, for lack of a better term, or then the only way you could be having these, if you were really having these experiences, you wouldn't talk about them. And again, that was because of how I had been brought up, or the messages that I'd received from people, whether directly or indirectly. And because I figured if you have enough self-awareness to talk about these experiences, to know that you're experiencing it, then sure, you can't really be suffering from it because you're aware that it's happening. And I know that might sound a bit strange, but for some reason that was just how I thought about it. Like if you were really having this experience, you wouldn't know that you were, or you wouldn't have the ability to really recognize it because you'd be too mentally ill. And because of I'd had bad experiences of trying to be open about things, throughout my life, and never really getting the response that I'd hoped for. I don't know, I just assumed anybody who was talking openly about stuff was just attention seeking. And this is something that I still kind of struggle with today. Like I try to be open about this stuff because I want to be able to share my experiences, and hopefully that will reach somebody else and could potentially help somebody else. But part of me feels like if I talk openly about it, then other people are going to see it as attention seeking, or me making it up, or something like that. That's just unfortunately one of those things that has kind of been programmed into me that I'm trying to undo. And again, I'd always had this thing of, don't talk about this stuff. There's certain things you just don't talk about with other people. And, why would you even want to talk about this with other people? It's something that's private. It's not necessarily shameful, but like, why would you ever expose yourself like that kind of thing? And again, that made me feel like I had to be quiet about it. So even through all the way through high school and everything, having all these experiences that I thought maybe were linked to schizophrenia or psychosis, I felt like I had to be completely silent about it, otherwise I was making it up. And it's daft, but that's just kind of how I thought about things. And even now, sort of, as I said, I still kind of struggle talking openly about stuff because I still have this thing of, well, this is shameful, or it's just not normal, and you shouldn't be telling people about it. And if you have the capacity to talk about it, then you're not really suffering from it. And I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but this was just this kind of thing that I've struggled with. So, I as I said before, when I did finally kind of start getting help, when I went to a doctor and finally said something, I was referred to a team that dealt with psychosis, and after 4 years of being with them, they kind of said they didn't think what I was experiencing was psychotic in nature. Like there were some things that I guess fit, but overall not enough. And then that was when I was given a working diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder. And in the last couple of years, as I've paid more attention to that and looked more into it, it fits a lot better. I'm still in the process of trying to get it diagnosed officially. It's a bit of a pain in the arse going through all of that here in the UK, but that's where I am with that. And I can understand why a lot of people don't believe in it, because it does sound quite out there and like it's just not possible. And mostly that's because there's very limited resources about DID that are accurate. It's still something that is being researched and still I feel has a long way to go until we fully understand everything about it. The current understanding is that you need to have experienced repeated childhood trauma, and that trauma can be just about anything, whatever a child perceives as traumatic. is trauma. You know, it's usually, you hear people talk about sort of very horrendous, horrific abuse, and although there are people with DID who definitely have suffered, you know, really bad physical or sexual abuse, there are a lot of people with DID who haven't had that, and there are also people who have suffered really, really terrible abuse who haven't developed DID. So there's obviously more to it than that, but the idea is repeated childhood trauma, a disorganised attachment style to caregivers, so you weren't able to really connect with or depend on the people you were closest to for support, and also a tendency toward dissociation as a coping mechanism. And it's still seen as a massively controversial thing. You know, a lot of professionals still don't really believe that it's a thing. So, you know, it's understandable that for a lot of us, that people can get very defensive about this, because, like I said, chances are they're used to not being believed. And when you're seeing people online who you question if they're really experiencing DID, you know, it can get quite heated and quite frustrating. And for me, you know, I don't think I've ever encountered a person who I think is faking. I imagine, yeah, there'll be lots of people who do. I know there's been times where people have tried to use DID as a way of getting out of murder. I've definitely heard of cases where people have killed someone and then claimed that they have multiple personalities, and it's one of their personalities that did it, you know, trying to claim that they aren't responsible for what they've done. And again, you know, what a perfect excuse. Oh, I didn't really do it, it was, you know, a different personality. And in those cases, all those people, you know, it's been proved that they don't have DID because they don't really understand what DID is, and it's clear that they don't have it. But yeah, as I say, I can see why it's very frustrating for a lot of people to maybe look at somebody else who, you know, and question what's going on, if they're being truthful and if they're just using it as online clout. Is that a thing? I don't know. But as with anything, you know, it could be attention seeking, it could be many things, or there could be people who just don't know what they are experiencing, and DID might feel like the closest fit, so they will kind of self-diagnose, which, you know, I'm not against self-diagnosis, especially, like I said, with DID. It can be, like here in the UK, I found very difficult to actually obtain a diagnosis. So for a lot of people, self-diagnosis, it makes sense, and like I said, I'm not against that. But yeah, people who fake DID, I mean, it's just, you know, it's really shitty if people do that, because, you know, it could potentially hurt a community that's already struggling to be seen and to be heard and to be believed. I'm not ever gonna accuse anybody of faking, because I don't know. I can't know. And as far as, you know, dealing with people online, I tend to just not bother, because I don't know, maybe it's because I'm older now, and, you know, maybe I would have taken part in a lot of online discourse in the past, but I've always found it just to be so exhausting and just emotionally draining, and more often than not doesn't really achieve anything. You know, I'm at a point now where I just pick my battles. I'm not going to take part in something that I know will probably be fruitless and just make me feel like shit. So that's just kind of my feelings on people who fake or potentially fake, or, you know, my own difficulties in being believed, and how I struggle, how I have some internalized prejudice towards my own communities, really. But I am trying to work on that, and I'm trying to be more open, because I don't know, fuck it, if people don't believe me, then I don't know, then they don't believe me. So yeah, I'm at that point where I feel like I've just kind of gone off track and talked a lot of bollocks for the last 20 minutes, but yes, anyway. So thank you very much for watching, guys. If you would like to support me on Patreon, you can. There is a link to that in the description below, as well as all my other relevant links. I have been the Rara Rabbit. No, I haven't. Yes, I have. No, what is it that I say at the end of videos? That's it. I have been Max, aka the Rara Rabbit. I'll see you in the next video.